Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
The shooting in Orlando, Florida, took 49 lives and left more than 50 dead. It was carried out by Omar Mateen, the son of an Afghan parents. Also, during that shootout with police, he called 911, declaring his allegiance to ISIS and his support for the Boston Marathon bombers. Welcome to Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. In this presidential campaign season, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump, has expanded his call for a ban on Muslims coming to this country, with barring them from areas of the world that have been torn by terrorism. He's also said that Muslim immigrants do not assimilate into American culture and society, and he has called for the inspection of mosques as part of his anti-terrorist strategy. So joining us is political science professor Michael Laughlin, and also we will be joined on the phone by Muqtada Khan. He's a professor of the University of Delaware, specializing in Islamic studies, and also Bakir Sharif, who is with the Islamic Society of Delaware. So I want to first turn to you, Michael, and what do you make of the politics of this thing? Certainly Donald Trump seems to have doubled down, as it were, on his idea about banning Muslims coming to this country, suggesting, obviously, as I said a moment ago, inspection of mosques and so on. What's going on here politically, do you think?
I think the structural features of electoral politics are playing out, and that is on the Republican side, both Donald Trump, but also even senators like Senator John McCain, who recently has blamed Obama for the Orlando events. Because he hasn't stopped ISIS. So there's a playing out that radical Islam is the definition of the issue that's here. We have to do something more about terrorism and national security matters, and it's all being shaped in terms of the threat from ISIS, from what the Republican rhetoric is of radical Islam. On the Democratic side, what is happening is the definition of this issue is guns and gun control. And it's playing to a strength of Hillary Clinton, where she has called for a ban on assault weapons. I mean, the definition of the issue there is gun control, not radical Islam, the playing down of that kind of issue. And that plays to her strength and her base. And the Republicans are playing to their strength in their base as the fundamental dynamics. Those dynamics, I don't think, are going to change until after the election, after the dust settles.
I want to turn to Muqtada Khan. He's professor at the University of Delaware, specializing in Islamic studies. Muqtada, I wanted to ask you about the shooting. And first of all, when did you find out about it, and what was your reaction?
Well, I was very shocked. I was dropping my son off in Dover for the Boys Nation program for a week. And as we were getting off from the car, my son said, "Oh, my God, I can't believe this." And he showed me on his phone this news. It was very scary. And especially the body count, so America's biggest mass shooting ever in history. And now the crown is held by a Muslim. I could not express, and that too in the month of Ramadan. This is a month in which Muslims are supposed to stop doing anything and everything that stops them from thinking about God, about worshiping God. And this man commits one of the most horrific acts. It was very difficult to come to terms with. I've still not come to terms with it.
What is your sense about, or your reaction to how, as we were talking a moment ago about the politics of this, how the political class responded? Obviously, this is a major issue within the presidential campaign.
Well, obviously, in the sense that since then I have spoken at several churches. And one of the churches, one of my reactions was that this is like a $500 million free campaign for Donald Trump. This is as if someone has just donated a huge sum of money to his campaign, an event that will turn a lot of people to become sympathetic to his anti-Muslim, anti-immigration rhetoric. And then, of course, the Democrats are also trying to use this to push the gun control. But I must say that, this man was suffering from an identity crisis. Maybe he was hating himself because he hated the fact that perhaps he was gay, but he was also radicalized. He had already started talking about ISIS. But what is important, in my view, is that in his moment of madness, when this rage consumed him, if he didn't have access to guns, what could he do? And this idea that easy availability of guns will continue to remain is shocking. But I also think that now that Muslims are using guns, a lot of people might change their opinion about making at least assault weapons and machine guns so easily available to everybody.
I want to turn to Mr. Sharif, who he is with the Islamic Society of Delaware. And Sharif, when did you hear about it? How did you learn about the shooting, and what was your own immediate reaction? Are you there?
Oh, yes, okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So I was talking I was on a long distance call with my brother in Pakistan, and he asked me, "Did you hear about what happened in Florida?" And I said no. And I immediately opened the television, went on the computer, and, until then, the person was not identified. And, we were just hoping, that this individual or individuals, they do not, or he doesn't turn out to be a Muslim, because then here we go again. So this is how I found out.
And what's been your reaction to some of the political rhetoric that we've now seen? Some of the proposals, obviously, Donald Trump has come down the hardest in terms of inspection of mosques, talking about expanding the ban of Muslims coming into this country. How do you assess this reaction?
I mean, these things were expected. We Muslims always thought that there could be some incident at any point, and there is going to be a backlash. But that's the fact. It happened. But what now Muslims must do is they have to clearly, come out and explain, educate people. Hopefully, we'll be able to find more listening ears. And this is, hopefully they will try to learn and understand what the reality is. And that's why there's something I want to make it very clear, that we hear all the time, radical Islam, fanatic Islam, moderate Islam, Shia Islam, Sunni Islam. As a matter of fact, it's only one Islam, and you have to follow it in its entireness. How much you follow, the judge is only God. So we have to make clear distinction of that. This individual or others who have committed these crimes, they are criminals. Basically, once you take an innocent life, you're out of Islam. It's very clear. It has nothing to do with Islam. This is not radical Islam. Radical Islam to me is those people who are compassionate, who are merciful. Like Dr. Muqtadir was saying, this, especially the month of Ramadan, is the month of mercy and forgiveness. So what this guy was doing, 2 a.m. in the morning, plotting and trying to kill so many innocent people. So this distinction has to be made, and we have to explain as Muslims to other people that this is not Islam. So God clearly says, you take one life, innocent life, and you have killed the entire humanity. Those people who commit murders like these, they will not even smell the fragrance of paradise. So this is very clear to us that this is not Islam. So we have to completely explain to people to understand that he may be a Muslim, he claims to be Muslim. Even the group that he is pledging allegiance, ISIL or ISIS, they have already been excluded. They have nothing to do with Islam. They do not represent Islam. They're excluded. All the scholars have come out and said it very clearly.
I want to turn to you, Michael Laughlin, because one of the things that struck me about the response, Trump aside for a moment, is that there's been this reaction, even amongst the Republican leadership, to reject, for instance, the ban on Muslims coming in. Certainly some real queasiness about inspections, that kind of thing of mosques. What do you make of that? It sounds as if he may be speaking to a particular segment of society, and certainly some, stereotyping, as it were, I guess, in American society. But the political leadership seems to be pushing back on some of this, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans.
Well, I think there is an element, a dimension of certainly the part of the conservative wing within the Republican Party that is constitutional. That is, that they do honor constitutional dimensions. You can't claim Second Right amendments and then disregard First Amendment rights of freedom of religion and the like. So I think that we're seeing that come out with certainly people like Jeb Bush and certainly Paul Ryan and the like that are queasy about that, because there is, again, part of the Republican Party that doesn't want to reject the Constitution as much as someone like Donald Trump may want to do. The other part of this I would like to comment is that I think that what we're seeing in the conversation you've just had is a fight for the definition of the issue. How do we define this event, right? And I think this is the battle that is going forward. And indeed, I think part of the whole effort of the filibuster in the Senate was an attempt, not so much really to move legislation, but to move the definition of the issue. This issue is not about Islam. It's not about terrorism. It's not really about the problem of immigrations. It's about access to guns. Because this person was not an immigrant. He was an American citizen, as many people pointed out, born not so far away from where Donald Trump was born. So, and if he had not had easy access to AR-15 style weapons, this would not have occurred. And so I think that moving forward, that is going to be the fight that takes place.
I want to raise an issue that Trump raised, which he suggested that Muslims are not assimilating in American society. And what I mean by that is not just simply a first generation, but that's a second or third generation. In his view, their assimilation is not occurring. Mukhtar, I want to address that to you. What do you make of that claim?
See, one of the most fascinating things about Donald Trump is that you can summarize every speech of his in one sentence. He just stands up there and says, "I am profoundly ignorant about America. Please vote for me." This man has done no research. He has no policy advisors. There are many, many reports that have been done on American Muslims since 9/11. If you just Google Pew studies and look at it, you will find that American Muslims have become far more mainstream than any other. For example, even on the issue of gay marriage, 42% American Muslims approve of it and accept it, as opposed to evangelical Christians. On various issues, American Muslims are mainstream. American Muslims are in the military. Nearly 15,000 Muslims serve in the military. Muslims are engaged in politics. Nearly 89% of Muslims who are eligible to vote in elections. So American Muslims have become far more mainstream. American Muslims are more engaged, in fact, especially as a result of such events. So this argument that American Muslims are not engaged or they are not assimilated is quite unusual. I think Donald Trump is not yet assimilated with America. That's why his disapproval ratings are now at 70%. But one thing that must really be made very clear is this, that in our country, in the last 180 days that we have had in this year, we have had more than 180 mass gun shootings. We have had 4 mass gun shootings since the Orlando shooting. And yet there seems to be so much tolerance, so much acceptance of the deaths. The number of people that have died from gun shootings in America are more than the people who have died in all the wars that America has fought. And it is mind-boggling that we have so much tolerance for so much violence and so much of death. So many children died out of these mass gun shootings and accidents, etc. And then on top of that, that very constituency which is tolerant of this kind of violence is also consumed by hate of minorities, whether they are religious, hate of minorities, if they are racially different. It is going to tear the very foundations of this nation apart. And therefore, it's very important that not just Democrats and American Muslims, but even Republican leaders challenge Donald Trump on this assumption, not only that American Muslims have not assimilated, but that other minorities like Hispanics and Mexicans have not assimilated in this country.
I want to turn to Sharif for a moment because you're with the Islamic Society of Delaware, and one of the things that has struck me is that there was an immediate outreach, as I understand it, between the Muslim American community and the imams on the one hand, and the LGBT community on the other. What has that relationship been like? And I mean, is this necessarily something new, or is this something you think that's going to energize that relationship?
Before responding to that, one of your comments about Donald Trump's comments about the mosque, surveillance and all that. So actually, even if you ask the authorities, they would say that mosques, they are the safest place. And the best Muslims are being represented at the mosque. They are engaged in so many good activities which are the basics of this American fabric. So many good things are happening, and especially since 9/11, the outreach, the interfaith, not just conferences, but joint projects, including from our Islamic Society of Delaware. So many good things are happening, and we have some very good friends. So basically, this idea is coming from somebody who is completely ignorant of the fact that what is going on. Now, to your question, if I understand it correctly, I think as a Muslim, the way I see it is Islam has a certain guideline on this issue, which I think will be well explained by, I leave it to the Islamic scholars. But what I understand that how to deal with LGBT is through compassion, because this is what Islam teaches us. Your beliefs are your beliefs, their beliefs are their beliefs, but when you deal with each other, deal with compassion and mercy. So this is my response, and this is most Muslims, this is how they would respond.
Can I add something to that, Don?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what is interesting is that the mosques have not really come forward much. At least in Delaware, the mosques have not come out and done anything at all in the last 4 or 5 days on this issue. There are condemnations of terrorism, but not much outreach to the LGBT community. In fact, the only organization which in the last 4 days has participated in all the interfaith prayers and events has been the Delaware Council on Global and Muslim Affairs. If you look at the media coverage in the News Journal, you will find articles about the coverage. The mosques are caught in this dichotomy, especially the religious leaders, because there is a latent homophobia in the community. So if the leaders come out and support LGBT, then they are afraid that they may lose support within their own mosque community. So they are caught between this double bind. If they are silent, then they are seen as not so compassionate to this strategy and obviously out of the mainstream. But on the national level, you can see, especially Muslims in Florida and the mosques in Florida, they had prayers for the LGBT community, for the tragedy, for those who died in Orlando. They have doing a massive fundraising. The mosque in Orlando, the main mosque, which also has about 11 quasi-mosques under Imam Masri, has been doing a massive fundraising drive to support the victims and their families. National organizations have issued directives for Muslims to raise funds and to go and help So there is a lot of outreach, and a lot of individual Muslims have been participating in vigils and prayers, worship, etc. And of course, there's also a discussion now. If you look at Muslim news magazines such as Alt Muslima, etc., you will find that there are intense debates about how to balance religious freedom with also tolerance and compassion to the alternative lifestyles. This has also given opportunity for a lot of gay Muslims to come out and speak vociferously. So you see people like there is a gay imam in Washington, D.C. who has been all over the media. There are photographers who've been taking pictures. So there's been a kind of a small window of opportunity for gay Muslims to come out and show themselves and speak. So you can hear on media, there were some on NPR the other day. There are lots of op-eds that are being written by some of them. So in a sense, there is some progressive moves impacting the community. But I wish the mosques would come out more and do things and also do something on the civil rights aspect of this issue, because we are in this funny situation where American Muslims have now to reach out to the rest of America to support them in their fight against Islamophobia. And so when we ask of America to help us fight to defend our rights, we must not hesitate to fight with America to defend the rights of other minorities, whether they are GLBT community or whether they are Hispanic or whether they are Hindu or any other community.
I have a comment on this.
Yeah, very briefly.
Because this is important to, so what from the mosque, because I got the impression that we are not doing enough. So just briefly, this is what we are doing. Our monthly food drive, we have two coming on the fourth Saturday, which we do with many other interfaith setup with other organizations.
Okay, Sharif.
Most of our clients, we call them clients, people homeless or less fortunate we serve. Many of them that I personally know are gay or from LGBT. So we are practically involved helping them. And also, there is going to be a 3-series interfaith, many organizations. So the first conference will be in a Catholic church. The second will be in the synagogue. And in end of August at Islamic Society of Delaware,
Sharif,
where
Sharif,
faith
I'm
people
going to have to,
and they will talk about compassion.
Okay.
Compassion in Christianity, compassion in Judaism, compassion in Islam.
Sharif, I'm going to have to cut you off there. We're just coming up here on the end. I want to thanks to Muqtada Khan, professor at University of Delaware, specializes in Islamic affairs. Also, Fakhar Sharif, who is with the Islamic Society of Delaware, and of course, political science professor Michael Laughlin. This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, view the daily times, or visit pac14.org.